It's titled Jesus Washes His Disciples' Feet. It was just before the Passover feast. Jesus knew that the time had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. The evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realise now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus answered, "A person who has had a bath needs only to wash his feet. His whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you." For he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said not everyone was clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. "Do you understand what I have done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. I tell you the truth, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them."
Can you show us the first page? By the grace of God, Carol and I became parents, and my beloved baby Noah is just there with her mother. Oh no, she is. And now he's 8 weeks old, and many people said your life will be very different after the baby is born. And now I can see they were right. I never imagined I will have lack of sleep, meals, and time for myself because of the baby. I wasn't confident to wipe out the baby's poo, even though he's my son. So I was worried about that. But now it is one of my main job at home. Thankfully, I adjusted, and the baby adopts the new world. And he recognizes me and contacts his eyes on me when I hold him. Especially when I wash him, he fixes his eyes on me. As a father, I serve him. Through the time, I've realized that my service and devotion for the baby Noah build up the intimate relationship between Him and me. The story from today's passage begins with the two relationships Jesus has. Verse 1. It was just before the Passover feast. Jesus knew that the time had come for Him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved His own who were in the world, He now showed them the full extent of His love. In other version, it says, until the very end. The relationships Jesus has is with Father God, and the other one is with His disciples. And He shows us how to maintain and improve the relationships with both of them as the Son of God and the Lord of His disciples. And He says the relationship will be until the end. Our relationship is easily broken depending on the condition. If somebody is going well with us, it lasts long. But if somebody is cranky with us, we often end up the relationship very quickly. Even between husband and wife, or sometimes parents and children, the relationships with sinful nature have is so weak. People make the relationships according to the benefits that they have. So sometimes a friend becomes an enemy, and the enemy becomes the friend. But Jesus chose to keep the relationship with His people until the very end, as He loves them. Then my question today is how Jesus keeps the relationship for both of them. We all as a Christian want to have good relationship with God and people around us. But we struggle so many times. Then what is the secret to keep the relationships healthy and last long? There are three ways Jesus shows us to have the intimacy with God and other people. First, Jesus has intimacy with disciples by giving up His rights. Many people called and recognized Jesus as a teacher or a master. Jesus has been respected and honored by the people. We can even see how people treated Him in chapter 12. Next. Chapter 12, verse 1. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus arrived at Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped His feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of His disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray Him, objected, "Why? Wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor?" It was worth a year's wages. Mary took a year's wages worth perfume and poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped His feet with her hair. Do you think she was humiliated by her action? It must be great honor to have the Lord at her place and see Him in person and talk to Him and serve Him. It wasn't an inappropriate action. What Mary did to Jesus was a very appropriate act because He's the Lord. Long time ago in Korea, when there was a king servants and people kissed on king's feet when the king passed through a town. That action was the honor for their family. As his people, giving a respect was natural. Now let's see what Jesus does, verse 4. Next. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. What Jesus is doing here is he's taking the form of a servant. The king became the servant, which means he gave up his right as the king. Next, Philippians chapter 2, verse 6 and 7 says, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. Giving up a right isn't easy. People argue for their rights. As a sinful nature, we always seek for a right we can have. As a citizen, member, husband, wife, parents, children, teacher, student, an elder, pastor, a deacon, a director, staff, employer, and employee. There are so many rights we have. And we don't want to give up the right to serve people and God. I found myself giving up my rights is getting difficult. As I came from Korea hierarchy culture, at the beginning of my life in Australia, it wasn't easy to say no when someone asked me to do something which I don't want. I thought if I say no, it could make the person embarrassed or offended. So I often said yes, even though I didn't want. So sometimes people thought me as a yes man. But now I say no. No. And if I don't want. And I say, why? Why should I do? I have a right to say no and why. But I found if I say no and why at any time, or without respect and consideration for others, unless it's against God's law, it doesn't help to keep a relationship well. We can say no and why, but with respect and consideration. How many times do you say no and why to your husband, children, church leaders, or even to God? Jesus wants us to be a servant for one another by giving up our rights. It is not easy, but that's what Jesus did. Next. Second, Jesus has intimate relationship by humbling himself. Verse 5, after that he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. In Jesus' day, people walked on dusty roads in sandals. So it was a custom for the host to arrange for water to be available for the washing of feet. Normally, slaves performed the act of washing the feet of dinner guests. Moreover, it was considered to be a task reserved for non-Jewish slaves, who was lowest of servants. Apparently, there was no one volunteered to do that. Here Jesus, the guest of honor, the Lord of lords, King of kings, dressed himself like a slave, with a towel around his waist, and insisted on washing the feet of his disciples. He is humbling himself by washing their feet. And Philippians chapter 2, verse 8 says, next, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself. Compared to the humility of Jesus Christ, now we can see Simon Peter's pride. Next, verse 6, he came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus replied, you do not realize now what I'm doing, but later you will understand. No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. You are not belong to me. Then Lord, Simon Peter replied, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. If you don't read this carefully, we can say Peter is a good man considering Jesus, but he isn't. Many scholars say this is Peter's pride, rebelling the dignity of humility. He decides what Jesus can do and not do. In his mind, he thinks a teacher will never wash the feet of a servant. He has a very simple mindset that high-positioned person never serve lower people. That is a simple mind. As Korean hierarchy society, when seniors try to serve junior or young people, they say, no, 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 please don't do that. I will do it. Then when they become a boss, they have expectations for the young ones or lower positioned people to show or give them respect. Still, there are many authoritarians in a countryside where there is no good educations. But nowadays, many mature seniors take an initiative to serve others and humble themselves with gentle spirit, and they are respected more. Young Korean people respect seniors not because of the position, but because of their humility and gentleness. Galatians chapter 5:13 said, you, my brothers, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the sinful nature, where to serve one another in love. We are called to serve God and one another. That is the humility. When we meet a humble person, we feel very comfortable because they are not aggressive. And wherever the humble person goes, there is peace and healing. They bring peace, joy, and comfort because there is Jesus in them who humbled oneself. If you don't have peace or joy or comfort in you, just check whether you are thinking of the humility of Jesus Christ or not. Nowadays, as I get stressed and pressured, I'm easily cranky with Carol. Then I regret and think I wasn't in humble spirit. And I find the answer why I was doing that. It is because there is no Jesus in me. I realized I cannot be humble unless I know how Jesus humbled himself for me. The humility Jesus showed in this chapter is extraordinary. He washed even the feet of Judas, who will betray him. Jesus already knew Judas who will abandon him, but he washes his feet. Are you willing to wash the feet of somebody against you? That's what Jesus did. Next, third, Jesus has intimate relationship by obeying God. Verse 16 and 17, I tell you the truth, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. It was the day before the official day of Passover. He knew he will die on the cross within the 12 hours. Passover, it was the day to commemorate the first redemption by sacrifice from the judgment of God. There is no more Passover needed because Jesus Christ himself will be the final sacrifice. The reason Jesus washed disciples' feet was not because their feet were dirty. It was the shadow and symbolic for his death and resurrection. As the shadow of the death, he was showing the disciples how to obey God, which they never understood until Jesus was died on the cross. Philippians chapter 2 verse 8 says, And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. He chose to die to obey God for saving sinners like us. He showed his love and kept the relationship for his people as he obeyed to die. Finishing the message, I like to read a story from Moses, International Director of Global Asian Medicine Association, who has been at Tali last year. He has been suffered from polio since he was young. This is his story. In the center of Albania Mission, there was a cross of Calvary standing. The core of mission was not how to live, but how to die. When I was passing by the toll gate, there was full of joy, peace, courage, and hope. But when I was getting closer to the downtown of Mission, there was the hill of the cross of Calvary at the center. Jesus invited me like Simon to the cross, but I wanted to avoid it. From the time I began to get sick, there was something in me which I made not to get close to the cross. Though I intuited that when I joined the cross, and I could be united more intimately with Christ and have a deep level of intimacy, but I had no strength to do. During the years of suffering with degeneration of polio, I began to learn this way of the cross, the answer of the problems of my life and ministry was at the cross. The key for the mission was not how to live, but to die. The key to maintain the intimate relationship with God and others is to die yourself. Do you want to have intimacy with God and others? Be a servant that is giving up your right, humbling yourself, and obeying God. That's the way Jesus taught us this morning. No matter you are willing or not, Jesus commands you. And if you do that, you will be blessed. Amen.